Chapter 3. The Unlight. We huddled, pressed against the cliffs. Soldiers formed two lines with their buzzsaw rifles ready to fire, one line kneeling, the other standing just behind. All the veteran explorers had their drill guns aimed, guarding the flanks of the soldiers. The newcomers, including myself, held a more frightened position, kneeling on the ground beneath the rock face with our drill guns pulled from their holsters, but too afraid to point them at anything. Pramyan lay snoring behind us, and soon we all waited in drenched clothing. A stillness grasped the winds, until a sudden howling broke the silence again. One by one, the creatures came into our sight, out of the mists of the storm, well over 20 or so. Elior plopped down on the small boulder beside me. He had told the captain to hold fire unless the creatures came within 20 footsteps. "Are you not an explorer?" I heard Elior chuckle. "This is your first moment of danger. Should you not be excited?" I had no answer, only a question as I fumbled through my pack to dry my hands and grab my leather-bound notebook. I began to inquire about the beasts when Garvish interjected a snotty retort to what Elior had said. The MKR told him that we would have to feed him to the beasts if he was not quiet. Elior's comment made me giggle, but only momentarily, as he did not appear to jest. "The beasts are known as reverie hounds. You might say they are a hybrid of the Canis lupus variety," Elior uttered to me. "They are drawn to loud noises like thunder or shouting, and they especially love the scent of a particular rain that falls in the Deadlands." One beast drew closer, just in the line of my sight. The reverie hound's appearance was dullish and stone-coloured, coupled with splattered hues of dark cocoa. Its musculature was broad, with razor-edged claws and a peculiarity, an exposed spine resembling armour along its backside. "See that hardened extra layer of bone along its back?" Elior continued to explain. "Keeps the creature from standing on its hind legs and raising its head too high." "You mentioned they follow the scent of this rain," I responded. "Why is that?" "Makes things smell and taste sweet," Elior clarified. "The scent can send other creatures into a full, ecstatic trance, like Pramyan over there, that heightens the senses to the point of passing out. Reverie hounds find these victims and easily make a meal of them." "Reverie hounds are cowardly in nature," I heard Zenobia quietly chime in a reminder. "But they will attack if provoked by loud noises or on the verge of starvation. They are also known to be cannibalistic." I jotted these notes down in my journal. They had taught us about such an animal at Langdon. The difference from book to experience was uncanny, and I felt I had forgotten every lesson I studied in my Wilderness and Beasts course. One by one, the reverie hounds faded back into the mist whence they came. I overheard Elior tell the captain to ensure we remained close once the storm passed. The reverie hounds were surely going to follow us at a distance. Nanasha inquired more about the rain with the specific scent. I interjected my pleas for elaboration as well. I had not heard of such a thing. Elior only smiled and let us know that it was one of the mysteries of the Deadlands. We could not press the MKR further despite our skepticism of his answer. Our pace doubled once the rain let up. Pramyan had awoken in a keen panic and remained close to the front as we travelled. We trekked for at least another half day without incident. All we heard were a few howls in the distance. Then, as darkness retook the land, we were near our destination and close to the mouth of earth that would take us into the Unlight. We paused for one more night to sleep just inside the entrance to the cave before going any farther. As we set up camp, we heard the howls draw dreadfully closer to us. Elior's head slowly perked up. He urged everyone to be silent. Again, the howling grew louder and doubled in numbers. "Captain!" Elior cried out. "Get everyone into the cave! Now!" His urgent tone did not leave the captain much time for hesitation. He and his soldiers grabbed what supplies they could and practically shoved us all into the throat of the cavern, fumbling for our lanterns. "We need guards at the entrance to keep them from following us in," Elior insisted. The captain nodded and shouted for 15 soldiers to take up arms while the rest of us stood behind them. "Hold this ground," he commanded. "Do not let any of them through." "I will remain here for now and catch up once the sun rises," Elior explained as soon as the soldiers were in place. The captain nodded. "Keep a steady pace, ensure everyone stays together and not go near dark pools of water." I watched as the captain led the rest of the soldiers ahead of everyone else, down into the dark, with lanterns held high to guide our feet. I glanced at Elior as he reached into his fit and flare frock to reveal the dark cocoa holsters clasping his drill guns coated in copper. He pulled them swiftly from their nest and pointed them toward the howling that now thundered in echoes inside the cavern. A sudden tug pulled me away, a grasp that reminded me of my mother when she was angry with me. Zenobia yanked me away to keep up with the others. When my head turned and my feet began to shuffle along the rocky floor swiftly, I heard saw blades resound, the snarls of hounds turning to silence, and shouts of men mustering courage against a foe I had never truly fathomed. The echoes of violence followed us as we marched deeper into the tunnel and began to fade as we ventured further into the Unlight. For 3 hours we journeyed downward. We heard nothing to hear except the sound of the wind in our lungs and the shuffling of feet, though we did our best to step lightly. I could hear whispers from the young men who had scoffed at me days earlier. I had resisted joining their company for some time. Now we clustered together to remain safe, and I could sense their fear held the potential to endanger us all. Roaming in the Unlight is strenuous on the mind. Even after a few more hours, I swore I could feel vile hands lurking in the dark to drag me off to meet my doom. I'm sure many of the others felt the same. At times, I thought I would see glowing eyes staring back at me from the gloom. But then, I would blink only to see my lantern flickering before me. The veteran explorers appeared nervous as well. I've never seen so much sweat drip from middle-aged men. Zenobia remained by my side.
In the corners of my mind where darkness looms, a place where nightmares dance and monsters consume. I step into the abyss where fear finds its home, where the unlight whispers and I'm all alone. In the depths of this void where nightmares conspire, a haunting melody enchants with its fire. I'm tangled in the web of these twisted dreams, a prisoner of the Unlight, or so it seems. Feel the chill in the air as the shadows creep, as if crimson watches a dry sleep. They crawl and they slither.
Her darting gaze kept my thoughts uneased. "I hope we reach the mystic silver soon," she whispered. "I have never gone into a cave such as this, where shadows so swiftly abduct the light away." "Perhaps we are not only here for the precious metal," I reasoned to her. "What else would be worth searching for to risk our lives so frivolously?" "It is not frivolity," a man's voice reached me. Zenobia and I jumped. We turned to see Elior standing just behind us. The others must have heard us jump, and all the footsteps stopped. The captain made his way back to where Elior stood. The two began to converse, where Elior reassured them he had not lost any soldiers, and that they would have caught up with us sooner, should one of the soldiers not twisted his ankle coming down the mouth. The captain thanked Elior for keeping his soldiers safe. He then commanded us to rest, and stepped forward to address us. "I want you all to listen very closely," he began. "You may already know that this is not just a normal expedition. No expedition is normal out here in the wilds, but this one is essential. We are not seeking mystic silver to extract. We are journeying to ruins that fell long ago to find ancient artifacts. One we hope to bring home with us. Should we find mystic silver along the way, we shall do our best to extract as much as we can carry." The captain elucidated that once we had secured any artifacts, we would bring them to the surface. From there, a wareship would find our signal from the magic beans he carried. We were all given a couple in case some did not make it out alive. I began to analyse further the risk we were taking for what could be the only possible artifact more valuable than mystic silver: books. I could feel my adrenaline pump fiercely as our march resumed, and I heard the others murmur about the creatures we might face. The reverie hounds already staunched my mind with fear, realising they were beyond what I imagined. Yet the monster leaping around from the boys beside me was about gloom gnawers, a disgusting species and a prominent threat when exploring the Unlight. Their breed is classified as humanoid ratus. We know they keep in clans and can breed into the thousands with extreme cannibalistic tendencies. They often breed out of the necessity for food and wage war against one another, carrying off the dead to feed their clan. Gloom gnawers also feed on arthropods, glowing mushrooms, and anything else they can sink their teeth into. The discovery of their species came from the famous explorer I mentioned before, Sandulf Collins from Eastgard, as I recall. Collins is much accredited for discovering other organisms while roaming the Unlight. Some have said he was more interested in the thrill of discovery than the actual lining of his pockets from his ventures. During one of his excursions, he discovered what we have come to know as lurkers. Lurkers are classified as undead, corrupted by magical properties, and are found solely in the Unlight. Mystic silver is, of course, the assumed property for why they are walking around. Lurkers are usually found near large amounts of mystic silver. Collins led several expeditions, allowing him to study the behaviour and movements of lurkers. Much like gloom gnawers, lurkers can gather in great numbers and become overwhelming. My heart had no desire to see such atrocities, but I had prepared myself to face them, hoping I would not vomit at my first gaze upon them. My spiralling worry became disrupted as the lanterns ceased moving just ahead of Ninasha and me as we entered another large cavern. For what felt like a day or so, as tracking the time of day in pure darkness is difficult, we walked in hushed tones as Elior led the way. Now he stopped just inside the cavern entrance, appearing to be listening for something. Our breath could not even be heard as we all held our exhales until Elior finally turned back and smiled with a nod. His dim-lit grin told us to proceed, and we entered the cavern, preparing to rest. I assumed Zenobia heard me shivering while I tried to sleep. I felt her gently stir me. She whispered that I was more than welcome to bed with her. My slim frame does not retain heat like her adorable chubby dimples. Usually I do not care to talk about my frame. Though I am slim, I do not care so much for my bulky hips, untamable crimson locks and boyish chin, a ruthless raillery expressed to me by my mother. I do not care much for skirts or dresses either. Growing up and being forced to wear such things has tainted my taste. Though for social graces I will wear a bustle with a corset now and then. My preference, however, is exactly what was making me freeze while I slept. My lucky royal crimson and gold pinstriped ruffle shorts. Before snuggling into my wilderness bedding, I should have donned my specially made skinny denim trousers. Zenobia's hands felt like frost when they touched my bare legs. I opened my eyes to see a tiny man with sable slithering hair in the dimness of my lantern, kneeling next to me with a frightening hue. His eyes shimmered like heaven, his fingers bony and long, with sharp fingernails like the claws of a predator wrapped around my thigh. He wore a neatly kept, formal style of attire, frills and all, yet with a poor-looking gent's top hat full of rips and tears. His skin appeared paved with death and scars, but carried light brushstrokes of a daylit azure sky. I could not make a sound, sensing my throat dry with dread. I was dreaming to the best of my knowledge, but his hands were soft and carried a chill that made me struggle to regain the life in my lungs. His wicked smile, revealing his pointed dentitions, made me jerk my drill gun to meet his face and pull the trigger. The tiny man instantly vanished without any success of my bit piercing his terrifying features. Zenobia jumped up, bearing a blade. She screamed at me, demanding to know why I had fired a shot. Elior, not far behind her demands, appeared in front of us, taking us both off guard. He lit up the gloom just enough to put us at ease, and when he looked into my eyes, I felt he knew what I saw. "There was a man here," I blurted out. "He was very short, but did not look alive." "He appeared dead," Elior interjected. I nodded, and the MKR continued. "He knows we are here." We heard more footsteps approaching us. From the echo, it must have been the entire camp. Elior quickly turned and stepped swiftly toward the others. "Captain," Elior said, "it is no longer safe to rest here. We must move out immediately." Everyone hurried to pack up the campsite without question when I noticed Jish and Ferris were missing. I swiftly mentioned it to Elior, and he grabbed my arm tightly. He shoved me toward the far exit of the cavern with almost a panic in his tone, but assured me that we would look for them. We did not need to search for long, as we heard blood-curdling screeching from the next corridor where everyone headed. The MKR did not waste any time finding the source. Pramyan had resounded the alarm, overlooking a bloody carcass sitting up against a rocky slope just outside the cavern leading further into the Unlight. Elior saw the trousers and proclaimed Jish had fallen. Every soldier with us unstrapped their buzzsaw rifle and held them close, ready to fire. The captain bellowed an order for them to watch the shadows. I could not believe my eyes. Seeing what was left of Jish nauseatingly horrified us. In the dark, he appeared to have been bitten in half from the waist up. Elior clarified, though, telling us Jish had been torn. "What could have done this?" I asked Elior. "There are many things down here with us that should not exist," he replied. "But if I were to venture a guess, I would say it was a type of lurker. According to the tracks, I would say it was of abnormal size, and it appears poor Jish wandered off to urinate as I can smell a hint of ammonia from the wall. Whatever killed him did it quickly, and likely Farid went with him." "Why is Farid's body not here then?" I inquired. "Likely due to the monster taking him away," Elior deduced. "Not sure why a lurker would drag off an explorer's body without creating a blood trail to follow." It was our first encounter with the dangers of the Unlight. We had one dead explorer and one missing and likely dead. We also had more than one enormous problem than a lurker to deal with. In the next few moments, Bartus hysterically tried to take charge. He began screaming in the captain's face about our foolishness to follow the leadership of a MKR. The captain did not take Bartus's insubordination for long, though. As Bartus continued blabbering to the rest of us about how we should all turn back, he found a drill gun in his face and 15 buzzsaw rifles pointing at him when he turned back around to face the captain again. "You will be silent," the captain gritted his teeth. "Otherwise, I shall have you executed for sabotage and insubordination." "We should make him bait for the lurker," one soldier chimed in, but was quickly reprimanded by the captain. "Not a bad idea." Elior stepped into the circle of troops now gathered around the captain and Bartus. "This beast needs to be destroyed, otherwise it will continue to hunt us." "How does a lurker know how to hunt?" Pramyan stammered out. That is when we all learned more about lurkers than we truly wished to know. Elior enlightened us that lurkers can often change into something other than an undead thing. Sometimes they become more robust and agile, like a sophisticated predator. Some even grow a sense of intellect that could possibly communicate their thoughts. Undoubtedly, their thoughts would only be to eat the living. Bartus appeared to wet his trousers when he heard Elior's words. "Lurkers can often smell terror," Elior continued, closing the gap between him and Bartus. "It is the nectar of their appetites. They will track it until they can bite into it." From that point forward, Bartus walked ahead of us, unarmed, in the company of the captain and 5 other soldiers. The rest of the soldiers spread amongst us, watching the shadows. Elior's eyes glowed somewhat dimmer now, much less than before, barely matching the light of our lanterns. Even though I felt terrible for Bartus, I could not help but feel the MKR knew we would not see the lurker again, at least for some time. "What do you think happened to Ferris?" I heard Nanasha whisper to Elior. "As I said, lost and gone into the dark," Elior replied after a moment had passed. "I remember his light. If I could see it, I would find him." My heart thumped with a vast majority of fear, even shedding a couple of tears for the fallen. I could see it in the faces of the others in the dim light. Garvish, Pramyan and Bakama began walking well in front of us. I could not see their faces, but I could only imagine they were just as terrified. Nanasha seemed well composed, considering Elior's fatalistic response to his question. I ventured a question to the MKR about whether we would run into the lurker again or more. He did not respond. He looked at me, and I watched his eyes turn from azure to their golden hue and then to viridescent meadowfields. His head turned from me once his eyes became azure again, and he stepped away from Nanasha and me. I suspect Elior did not wish to frighten me further. We did not speak until we came to a much vaster cavern than we had travelled previously, with ruins from a lost civilization. We all knew what had caused the structures to collapse where they now lay sprawled out in the shadows. The city's remains appeared to command high significance to the civilization that once dwelt there in its day. Elior led us to a sizable broken structure that had stood aesthetically with tall pillars in its frame and perhaps grand archways to depict its significance. It was much unlike the structures built in cities of our current day and age. West Main architecture is more box-shaped, rectangular, and even carved out from the side of mountains. Our significant buildings always have some sort of thick plates of metal wedged inside the walls and foundations of concrete and iron. The building that Elior had led us to did not have thick metal plates from the walls anywhere, just broken iron bars embedded in the destruction. It gave me pause to theorize that people did not think of war at one point. I noticed Elior gazing at it as if searching for something of import. I did not mean to pry, but I asked him about the significance of such a place. He looked at me as if holding back tears from falling. Yet still, he said nothing. He turned back from the ruins and remained silent. After a few moments, Elior told the captain the soldiers should create a perimeter. He would scout the inside to ensure no lurkers or other beasts were inside. Elior walked up the steep rubble and found his way inside the broken structure. While he was away, I began investigating the outside further. Zenobia stayed close to me as we remained within the perimeter of the guard. Suddenly, I heard Zenobia whisper to me. I turned around, and she motioned toward a large metal plaque resting beneath the soil. Though cracked, the pieces had remained together. It read, "Library of Congress, Thomas Jefferson Building." I was so excited that we were standing on the ruins of an ancient library that I almost did not take notice. Zenobia had also pulled something else from the dust. She began shaking off the debris from the large piece of fabric. "I think I know what that is," I told Zenobia, with the enthusiasm of a little girl gorging on sweets. "It must be the banner of the civilization." "I believe you are right," Zenobia concurred. She quickly whipped me around to reach my pack. "You carry it, Agnea. I left my pouch where the others are resting. We can also etch this plaque," I said. "That way we can describe where we found this artifact." "While you do that," Zenobia sounded just as excited as me, "I shall start writing up the descriptive notes for the finding, then we can both sign them." If you are unaware, explorers who discover things together sign off on descriptive notes, should something be too heavy to carry back with them. In this case, the ruins of a building from a past civilization do not fit into a pack. Instead, explorers who write descriptive notes and sign them receive much higher validation and accolades for their findings. The banner and the etching would also contribute to proof of the findings. I finished the etching just as Elior reappeared outside. He motioned to the captain. All of us followed Elior back inside the ruins of the library, except for the captain and 15 soldiers who stood guard at the entrance. Surprisingly, the rubble had a clear path, despite a few awkward, winding and twisting turns. A large, dark pool of water spread in the centre of the foyer, approximately 20 arm lengths in diameter. Elior led us well away from it and went to the other side. "Take whatever books you can carry," Elior said, "but stay quiet. We do not need to advertise our presence." All the explorers fanned out and began flipping through dusty covers and pages, each one choosy in their findings, estimating what books would bring a higher price. All became first found, first served, as the soldiers began packing up books that held any decent condition. I had gathered that Elior was looking for a specific book but had difficulty finding it. However, it appeared as if he knew the foundations of the ruins well. We scoured the musty, collapsed shelves and torn manuscripts, seeing plenty worth scavenging. The MKR did not take notice of any of the ones I found, though I believe they were an excellent treasure and somehow remained in remarkable condition. One such discovery of mine was a book entitled The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by an author named Washington Irving. By the artistry of its illustrations and skimming through its text, I conceived there must have been a time in ancient history when a phantom of sorts preyed upon a small town. The second of my findings was a book titled Moby Dick by Herman Melville. The artwork depicted a monstrous sea creature. I can only assume it to be a historical documentary of a monster of the deep, which is not uncommon from what I have learned growing up. No one ventures the vast oceans, no one of sanity anyway. Nanasha almost picked up my third find, but his hands moved past it, proceeding to grasp a different book from a pile of manuscripts we found. I believe I chose it because the title intrigued me. The Scarlet Letter by an author named Nathaniel Hawthorne. Its title appeared somewhat romantic, and I figured that it would be a delightful read once we returned home. I will not keep you in suspense. The documentation is outlandishly horrid that I scarcely believed it is a part of humanity's ancient history. I shall not spend more time explaining my shock in reading it, as a woman named Hester Prynne is forced to wear a scarlet letter A because she was condemned for committing adultery. I do not comprehend the word scarlet, but I am appalled by what this woman went through while her child's father remained in high standing within his community. I found it an utter relief to learn he finally confessed his adultery before his dying breath. Despite my distaste for its history, this book struck me deeply, and I must confess, in its conclusion, it was one of my favourites to return to when I have a quiet night for such indulgence, but just for the ending alone. I scavenged through yet another pile as Elior continued his search, not more than 20 steps away from me. 4 others caught my eye, and I placed them into my pack, along with the first 3 books of documented history. These 4 appealed to me as they were most likely written as childhood bedtime stories, and tended to fetch a higher price. I have never read anything about magical ruby slippers. I am unsure what rubies are, but the artwork revealed a much brighter royal crimson that shined like mystic silver. The flying monkeys gave it away for sure, although I was undoubtedly skeptical from the beginning when the talking scarecrow was introduced. This first bedtime story I found was called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by an author named L. Frank Baum. The next one I picked up was a book entitled The Wind in the Willows by an author named Kenneth Grahame, with one also cited as the character illustrator Ernest H. Shepard. What a peculiar little story of talking animals. One an odd toad with an unquenchable wild persona, another a badger, well distinguished, almost to the extent of reminding me of my father in a way. It must mean that I am the toad, as Badger and his other friends, Ratty and Mole as they are called, constantly tried to curb Toad's unruly behaviour. However, I am likely more unruly from within, rather than the outward expression displayed by Toad. I blew a hunk of dust off the next book I raised from the pile to reveal its title, Charlotte's Web, by an author named E.B. White. This one had talking animals as well, along with a talking spider. Believe me, if I ever heard a spider talk, I would crush it. The thought of running into a spider in the Unlight still turns my stomach. Once documented, yet again by our famous explorer, Sandolph Collins, is what we know as Mystic Menardis. They are an arachnid breed, described to be just larger than a normal-sized residence door. As authenticated, they are found throughout the Unlight, but habitually remain in humid places. They collect dust from mystic silver and ingest it. The creature's webbing is highly resilient to tearing or breaking. It is not hard to spot, mostly appearing like giant glowing bulbs in the dark as mystic silver makes their abdomen illuminate bright gold and Jaffa. The rest of their body is a splatter of royal crimson and dark cocoa. Highly intelligent, the creatures prefer the taste of gloom gnawers rather than trying something new like human flesh. It was also documented that the creature can vocalize its thoughts, but this became dismissed on pure conjecture. In selecting my last book from the dusty pile, Where the Wild Things Are by an author named Maurice Sendak, I peered toward Elior, staring face to face with one of the creepy, 8-legged monstrosities. I felt my blood freeze but stared as Elior stepped bravely forward, and the creature slowly backed into the shadows. Yet its body still shimmered, its eyes peering back from the darkness. The creature's abdomen began to glow brighter gold and Jaffa, revealing a transparent heart beating at ease. It was not frightened. Elior peered back at me with a smile and motioned me to come and stand next to him. I cannot say I did not hesitate, but his grin comforted my racing pulse. After a few moments passed, I joined Elior before the enormous arachnid, serenely staring back. The MKR whispered to me to hold out my hand, palm facing upward. I trusted Elior, yet I did so tremblingly. My eyes shut tightly, and I could hear Elior softly chuckle. I slowly began to feel a hairy leg caress my hand in a circular motion, its texture springy and coarse. The 8-eyed dome peeked out of the shadows and into the light of my lantern. Dare I say I felt like the spider was smiling back at me through its dripping fangs. I am still terrified, I uttered to Elior. So is she, he replied. Do not take your hand away till she pulls away. She is getting to know your taste, which will insult her if you do so. I watched as the mystic Menardis slowly pulled its hairy leg back from my hand and nibbled on it. She will know you from now on, Elior said. She knows now that you are trustworthy and likely to share your taste with others like her. How does she know that? I asked. Elior explained that mystic Menardis could taste anything: fear, greed, hope, love, gratitude, sadness, joy, evil, and much more. And if it had tasted something awful like evil or greed, it would have killed me. I am still terrified, I said again. Good, Elior huffed out another chuckle. It means you respect them. They are private creatures and should not be tampered with. But should you return to the Unlight, know now that you have an ally in the shadows. Likely not going to happen, I conveyed. Elia just smiled back at me. It was the first time I did not appreciate seeing it. He stared into my eyes and then turned his gaze downward where the spider huddled. I followed his eyes and saw a dusty book lying under the arachnid. I turned my gaze back to Elior. He motioned to me. "Will you be so kind as to retrieve that book?" he asked. I felt a lump in my throat too large to swallow. A cold sweat swarmed all over my body. I heard a gasp just behind me. Elior and I turned to see Zenobia, struck just as fearful as me. The MKR put up his hand and ordered her not to scream. I turned back to Elior, who raised an impatient eyebrow as if to say, "I am still waiting." For whatever reason, I trusted Elior. I slowly approached the shadows and bent on one knee to grasp the book. I felt a gentle tap on my head from the spider, almost the same way you pat the head of an obedient child. I picked up the book and wiped the dust off the stern, leather-bound cover. I'm unsure what type of hide it came from, but I stood and glanced at the title. "What does it say?" Elior asked me. "The book is by an author named Jules Verne," I replied. "The title is Rober the Conqueror. Is this—" "It is one that belongs to me," Elior interrupted and took hold of the book. "Begging your pardon, Master Keeper," Zenobia politely intruded. "Would you be able to share with us what that is about? What history lies within those pages?" Elior kept his smile, seeing the two of us were intrigued. "It is historical. They are a couple of the last novels by this writer who wrote its sequel, Master of the World. At the time, his health was failing him. He was fearful in his precedents about the rising of tyrants." The explanation confused Zenobia and me. Elior could see it on our faces. Zenobia seemed disinterested in hearing more and respectfully took her leave. I also believe she was having difficulty being so close to the eight-legged monster. Yet Elior could see my concrete curiosity, and he began to elaborate more, but not about Jules Verne. "This book is not exactly what it seems." Elior kept his voice low, as if the walls had ears. "Look closely." I looked closer at the cover as the MKR held it up, and then I heard Elior whisper words in a language I had never heard before. "Seoda sa keapach I duizacht, ligdom do ruin a glakad." Astonishing is the only word I could use to describe the indescribable phenomenon. The book in Elior's hands began to morph and change into a completely different bound book. The cover changed to show a burned design of tilting trees reaching toward one another. The tangled roots stretched down and around to create a circle of thorns, surrounding what appeared to be 6 oculus objects. "What was that you said?" I inquired. "Open the cover," Elior replied with a smile, handing the book to me. I did as he told me, and I saw the exact words he had spoken written just on the inside of the cover as if precisely etched in and illuminated by sunlight. "Seoda sa keapachi duisacht, ligdom do ruin a glakad." What does it mean? "Gems in the glade awake, let your secrets be mine to take," Elior replied, his voice hushed. "Keep these words hidden only with you. There is great evil seeking to find this and unlock its secrets." I began turning through the book, and Elior could see how puzzled I was that all the pages were blank. I looked back to the MKR as he pointed to the only phrase visible inside the cover. "Memorize it and its meaning," he explained. "Once you do, in time, the book will reveal more to you. If you are in danger, the book will hide itself as it did before, even from you, so you must know the words to awaken it again." "You are giving this to me?" I asked, almost breathless. "To keep for a time," he replied. "There are many who wish to possess this, and if I walk out of the Unlight with it, it will be known the book was found. I will come for it in time." "Why do you trust me?" I wanted to know. Elior did not cease grinning. He grasped the book from my hands and placed it in my pack. Without another word, he slipped away from me. I desperately wanted to scream, frustrated as I had suddenly become, to demand an answer. His warning, the burden he had just placed on me, made me fear for my life. I pulled the book from my pack and opened the cover, ensuring no one was watching. I gazed at the etched, shimmering words in front of me. I did my best to remember how Elior pronounced them. I spoke the words softly again to the book, and the words illuminated brighter. I did it again, and the words grew even brighter still. "Agneya?" I heard Nanasha's voice behind me. I snapped the book shut. "What have you got there?" I heard his footsteps moving toward me, and I turned to see his face, but kept the book at my side, facing away from him. Just a book that appeared interesting to me, I said, noticing my voice was shaky. I could tell he was reaching for the book and I almost pulled away, yet he had already grasped it. He held up the cover to the light of his lantern. Rober the Conqueror by Jules Verne, Nirnasha said. Why, Agnea, you got yourself a rare find indeed. This one does not appear damaged at all. I was hoping no one would take notice, I said. I know it is a rare find, and I did not want anyone trying to take it from me. Nirnasha smiled. No worries, I know what you mean. I too found a mint condition book with 3 titles bound within the cover. Really? I asked, trying to deter his attention from Elior's book. What are the titles? I could probably retire on it, Nirnasha replied, placing Elior's book in my hand. The Lord of the Rings by an author named J.I.R. Tolkien. The 3 titles within its pages were Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and Return of the King. You might regret selling it, I said, slowly placing Elior's book from my hand back into my pack. Regret? Nirnasha appeared surprised. I would sell it because that is what being an explorer is all about. I am not sure I agree, I explained. I mean that I truly love the feel of books in my hands, and not because they would make me wealthy. I find the reward is knowing the history they entail and the stories they portray. You sound more like a professor than an explorer, he chuckled. He then motioned for me to follow him. Come on, Professor, rejoin the others. I think we are about ready to depart with our loot. Both of us ceased in our steps, noticing a noise from the dark. I thought it was the mystic Monardis moving further upward through the ruins. But it stopped moving, and I felt we were being watched by something more unusual and dangerous. Our next moments were remaining still with our lanterns. Perhaps one of the other explorers was trying to scare us. Yet the resounding soft echo that tickled my ears again came like a crunching and suckling noise. Nirnasha and I peered upward. A shadow came into view, rapidly falling toward us, and we jumped out of the way of Pramyan's broken body. Nirnasha shoved his hand over my mouth to keep me from screaming. He swiftly examined the body, shining his lantern over the corpse. The top of Pramyan's skull appeared gruesomely torn, but not from the fall. With a closer look, I saw several bite marks all over his legs and arms, exposing the insides of his muscle tissue. Nirnasha quickly turned his gaze upward, and my eyes followed. Several more shadows suddenly landed in front of us and just behind us. I screamed but yanked my drill gun from its holster, firing and hoping 2 things would occur. 1, hit and kill the thing. 2, alert the others. But of course, I missed it. When my drill bit ricocheted off the ground, the creature reared back but then began pressing forward like a hound on all 4s. The thing appeared humanoid yet lacked the posture to stand upright. Its skin glistened as if covered in a slimy substance but was darker than sable. More appeared above us. All of them screeched ear-piercing echoes, unhinging their jaws to reveal unnatural, jagged teeth. The blade of a machete flashed in the light of my lantern and swung wildly at the creatures in front of us. It appeared to take them off guard, and they swiftly leapt aside. My feet were in a full sprint before I even had another thought. Zenobia, though an older woman, matched my speed with Nirnasha right behind us. We heard the screeching fiends bearing down on our heels as we turned down the departing corridor, flickering with the lantern lights of the others. A bright beam flashed, and I felt a hot blast race by me. I dared not look back, but another light illuminated me. Again, another beam of heat whizzed by. I looked to see it strike one of the monsters that had just leapt to grab me. I lost my balance and skidded on my back, screaming as another one bared down and pounced. In mid-air, with its face about to feast on me, another beam of light cut clean through it. Whatever juices resided in its flesh, dark and sticky, bathed me from head to toe as the 2 halves split and fell on either side. Fortuitously, I did not have my mouth open. I felt Zenobia and Nirnasha rip me from the ground and pull me to my feet, and we were off running again. As we reached the others, I heard buzzsaw rifles zinging out several rounds. Elior was among them. Pleased to see you are in one piece, he told Zenobia, Nirnasha, and me. I did not have time to be in 2 places simultaneously. What do you mean? Zenobia asked. We were also attacked, Bartus interjected. We got prowlers trying to eat us, and that will be quite enough, Elior concluded by holding up a glowing hand, somewhat reinforcing Bartus's understanding of who was in charge. I assume prowlers ambushed you. Yes, Zenobia replied. If prowlers are about, Elior stated, Then the lurker horde will not be far away. Why do I hear more buzzsaw rifles outside? I asked. The captain is ensuring the prowlers do not block our escape, Elior explained. His soldiers are in good spirits and we should join them Elior ceased his words, catching sight of Nernasha standing by the dark pool. The boy had an expression of fascination and wonder, standing on the edge of it. He was slowly leaning forward, appearing hypnotized by something in the water. Elior swiftly but silently moved near the pool but did not reach its edge. Nernasha, Elior whispered firmly. Nernasha, do not reach for it. Nernasha glanced slightly toward the MKR but did not respond. His eyes returned to whatever was mesmerizing him under the water's surface. He bent a knee to reach down, his hand outstretched, slowly reaching to touch the surface of the black pool. Nernasha, I yelled at him. Nernasha, what are you doing? Stop. She's going to make me one of them, he fumbled back a reply. No, Elior insisted. She only wants to eat your heart. She loves me, Nernasha stuttered out. I could see sweat beating down his brow. I know she does. She does not, Elior pressed, his eyes illuminating brightly to their golden hue. I saw his hand behind his back begin to manifest a ball of light. Nernasha, if you reach for her below the water's surface, you will endanger us all. She is a tide maiden. She is not going to give you what you desire. Nernasha's eyes peered upward to meet Elior's again. He was trembling profusely. It did appear he was hearing Elior's words and wanting to follow them, yet he could not do so. The tension held between the two. Suddenly, Elior thrust his hand forward, releasing a beam of light. Before Nernasha could react, his right arm became severed from his body. The young explorer reared back, blaring in agony, and his arm fell into the water. It sank into the darkness, and two other veteran explorers quickly nabbed him from the water's edge, his missing limb cauterized below his shoulder. Sorry, Nernasha mumbled out of his intense wincing. I am sorry. I believe you, Elior reassured him. He watched the other two explorers help Nernasha to dress the cauterized area and inject him with a numbing agent. Elior turned to me and spoke firmly. Stay away from dark pools. What would have happened? I did not realize the question had escaped my lips before I received an answer. I would not fill your mind with such nightmares, the MKR replied. We must leave before the Tide Maiden alerts any others, and they surface to nab more of us. We do not need to deal with more abominations when the horde of lurkers is likely near. Bartus led the way with some others to rejoin the soldiers outside the ruins. We all exited through the narrow, winding path leading out into the great open cavern. The captain and his soldiers were still holding their ground. I pitied the motionless ones, cradled by the smooth cavern slate. The captain held their name tags in his hand and ripped another one from the neck of the deceased. Not many soldiers were left, and not as many books would be leaving with us either. They were waiting for us, the captain sighed as Elior and the rest of us reached them. They are still waiting. We thought there were only a few. We were wrong. I am sorry, friend, Elior replied. I need not your apologies, MKR, the captain quickly retorted. I should not have given the order to charge. We should have driven them back and then waited in the light. We should have... Your wishful thinking will not help us live. Elior placed a firm hand on the captain's shoulder. We must keep our wits and be clever, much more than we anticipated. What do you mean? The captain asked. Hardwin, you know there are worse things in the dark than lurkers or tide maidens, Elior explained. Wendigo is here. The horde follows him. We cannot go back the way we came in, Hardwin replied. We will have to push through and look for a different passage back to the surface. Was this a suicide mission or something? I belted out, feeling my frustration erupt from my toes and build into my face. It was more than that, Hardwin shouted me down. He paused a moment, realizing his voice was echoing throughout the cavern. He returned his tone to normal and then spoke to all of us. We needed to secure an artifact, yet we were not able to find it. What was this artifact? Bartus demanded. A book, Hardwin replied. A book filled with secrets of magic. I saw Elior out of the corner of my eye. He did not even turn his gaze toward me. I knew the book Hardwin was speaking of, yet my heart held my tongue and shut my mouth. I had been entrusted with the task of guarding the gems of the hidden glade. We need to find our way out of this place, Elior interjected. We will have greater troubles if Wendigo gets anywhere near us. Elior began trekking in the opposite direction from whence we had entered the cavern, severing more lurkers with his beams of light as he went. I quickly followed him, not only because I was frightened, but because I desperately wanted to speak with him about the name or creature he kept mentioning as if everyone was supposed to know it. Elior waved my question off and told me to focus on staying close to him. Zenobia chimed in on my question, whispering to me in hushed-filled tones. She told me about a slender, upright humanoid abomination with a body of dense bone and cartilage. I did not find it surprising that Elior was the main contributor to the documents Zenobia had read, but I did find it peculiar Elior did not wish to tell me himself. Perhaps it was the same as with the Tide Maidens. Yet even Zenobia only gave me small details from what I believed to be thorough manuscripts of the creature. She delved deeper into its appearance as we followed Elior to a new route out of the cavern. Wendigo's skull is similar to a human, yet protrudes 6 prehensile serpent-like tentacles from the sides of its head, 3 on each side, and have small, snappy heads of their own that bear razor-sharp teeth and the ability to taste the scented air around them. Its face has nothing, no eyes, ears, or mouth. Yet it has eyes on the back of its elongated hands with only 2 elongated fingers and 1 opposable thumb. The eyes on its hands glow royal crimson, but Wendigo does not use them for seeing. Instead, they vibrate its unsettling presence. "Enough!" Elior stepped in to cut off Zenobia's words. "We do not need Agnea more frightened as she is right now." What is not clear in the manuscripts about Wendigo is whether the creature is real or is a spirit that embodies a vessel, Bartus chimed in, which only made Elior turn with a glare on his face. "I said enough!" he reprimanded the both of them. "I shall not have the poor girl frightened more than she is. Keep your tongues from flapping." "I am not as frightened as you suppose," I said. One of Elior's eyebrows lifted. "Tell me, Agnea," Elior replied as we had now halted our quickened pace in a pitch-sable tunnel. "Do you want to be?" I could not believe it when I felt my shoulders shrug and saw another grin on Elior's face that was not so peaceful, but slightly terrifying. "Captain," Elior called him over without taking his eyes off me. "Take the others on ahead. The horde is behind us now. Miss Agnea and I shall catch up shortly." I was not too fond of the sound of that, but I did not resist. Hardwin and the others continued onward. Zenobia insisted she remained behind with me as well. Elior's eyebrow raised again but complied with her request. We stood in the gloom, our lanterns dimmed. Elior laid one hand on Zenobia's back and the other on mine, gripping our clothing. His eyes began to glow gold like starlight, and the light from our lanterns brightened, no doubt by his magic, to illuminate the figures lurking toward us. "Wendigo embodies the spirit of starving lusts," Elior uttered. "When its eyes glow from the top of its hands, they pierce and weaken the spirit, destroying the will of any living thing to give in and believe the taste of flesh is all that matters. I am unsure what will happen when Wendigo draws near, but you will feel the hunger rise. You will want to run, but you will not." My lips quivered and my body quaked. I do not know how, but I felt a presence that began stirring something in me. I could sense Zenobia was feeling it as well. The weight of Elior's hand on my back gripped me tighter. Then, in the haze of the illuminated tunnel, a slender figure came into focus, standing approximately 96 units in height. Its body appeared pale and dullish. Its head indeed protruded 6 prehensile serpent-like tentacles from the sides. The creature had no eyes, ears, mouth, or face. I peered downward at its hands, showing only 3 long, bony phalanges. I saw the eyes open on the back of its hands, emitting a glow of royal crimson. Wendigo was surrounded by undead, trailing him as if the monster were their champion. They continued to draw near to our lights. Again I felt something clawing at me, as if from the inside. I could feel the heads on the tentacles tasting my scent. The air around the creature whispered its name, sharp like a dagger penetrating all my senses, making my eyes swell with tears. I was enveloped in uncontrollable sobbing, and an overwhelming sensation to feed on the flesh beside me. I locked eyes with Zenobia, my mouth drooling and temperament escalating to savagery, yet I was still terrified by Wendigo, swiftly now racing toward us. The resounding of its name escalated louder, and feverish drips pulsed down my head. I blinked, and then Wendigo was gone. Zenobia and I fell, gasping for air, almost like something choked us violently. The cravings for flesh remained coursing through my veins, yet Elior reassured us it would pass as he continued holding us apart. "We must move quickly to the others," Elior said, helping both Zenobia and me to our feet. "From now on, you shall know when Wendigo is drawing near. You have tasted him and lived. You will know when he is coming whenever you find yourself back here in the dark." I found breathing difficult, but I began placing one foot in front of the other. My joints were stiff and my soul shaken into a haze, with a churning sensation in my gut. I heaved out a liquid substance, one not of bile but a sparkling pale goo mixed with blood. Zenobia did the same, and periodically we continued vomiting it as we raced to catch up with the others. My mind slowly returned to me, but the cravings for flesh did not fade from my bones maybe within the second hour. The hunger dwindled just as we caught up with the others. Every explorer drew weary from the weight they bore, but refused to throw their books away, ridding ourselves of our wilderness bedding and other gear. Some even rid themselves of the extra ammo they carried. The veteran explorers had taken up much of the load the soldiers were supposed to carry back to the surface. But the adrenaline rush soon ended for the group, and I could see that we were beginning to decelerate significantly. We were not going to outrun the Horde or Wendigo. Hardwin halted us and motioned to speak with Elior. The MKR approached the gasping captain. This time I was not close enough to hear the conversation between the two, yet I suspected it had something to do with Elior assisting us in our escape. I saw him nod to Hardwin, and the captain ordered us to continue. We moved slowly, following in the captain's footsteps, but Elior did not move. He captured the concern in my eyes and smiled to put me at ease. He whispered to me that he would see me again. "Keep it safe," I heard him say. "Do not let go of it." I watched Elior pull light from my lantern and form it into a hovering ball in his hand. The light of my lantern did not fade as it appeared. Elior reproduced the glow from one power source to create his own. "What do you call that spell?" I asked before I joined in following the others. "Not sure," he replied. "I have not thought of a name for this ability yet." "It would seem to me that you are revealing the replication of light," I said. "Why not call it something like Radiant Reveal?" "It has a nice ring," he replied. I turned and hastened my steps. I took only one glimpse back at the MKR, seeing the light source grow brighter and brighter into a ball of great size. It floated high above him, and his arms fell to rest at his side. I would see him again, which is the only reason I can explain what happened as Elior waited. After about a 2-day journey, I felt a soft touch on my shoulder in the middle of my slumber. Zenobia roused me that Elior had returned to us. I popped up and hurried to see him sitting by the bright lamplight. Hardwin, who appeared wholly weary, was sitting beside the MKR. His top hat was gone, his hair muddled, his face smudged with muck, and his clothes tattered. He sipped water from a canteen as I sat across from him. He looked up and did not hesitate to tell me not to be concerned with him, and he did not wait for me to ask any questions. Instead, he began from the time I last saw him. Wendigo came with the Horde shortly after Elior ceased hearing our footsteps. The lurkers did not care for the light source the MKR created and remained hesitant to approach. Wendigo, however, was not affected by the brightness. The eyes on the monster's hands remained shut as the slender creature approached Elior. The MKR began blasting it with beams of light that should have cut and burned through Wendigo's body. Yet the beams only shoved it back, and the penetrations remained shallow, like scraping a dagger across a rock. The abomination kept charging him, doing its best to grab hold of Elior. The MKR kept to his tactics, disappearing and reappearing away from Wendigo's grasp. But the light source Elior created dimmed and shrank each time he used magic. In his last efforts, Elior shot a beam of light into the crowd of lurkers, cutting down several into an explosion of intense light, setting ablaze the area of lurkers, sending all screeching in retreat. The bright light and fire stole Wendigo's attention, allowing Elior to slip away. "How did you not succumb to Wendigo's cravings?" I asked. "I ignore it," Elior replied, chuckling when he saw my reaction. The creature, Wendigo, sounded more frightening to me the longer Elior described his encounter. Elior could see my concern, or at least I felt he could. But I desperately wanted to know the MKR's answer to how he could resist the cravings. His response did not provide the comfort I was seeking. I know you can still feel the cravings. Elior looked at me. They are not as strong, but they will burrow into your dreams, even give you nightmares. You shall not be rid of them. Is there a way? Not unless Wendigo is killed, he replied. But there is something I can try to help you ignore the cravings the way I can. Do it then, we heard Zenobia firmly state from the shadows. I was startled, and I'd completely forgotten she was with us. Her body appeared worse than mine, feverish and teeth grinding. I was worried for her, and I could not believe I did not take notice when she awoke me earlier. Her body is dying. Elior's head slowly perked up. She's giving in to the cravings of Wendigo. Why did you show us Wendigo? I demanded. If you knew this would be the result, why did you not make us leave? Elior ignored my questions and stared intensely at Zenobia, as did I. Her skin was beginning to peel, revealing muscles decaying, her eyes milky like staring at a corpse from the grave. We must get her to the surface, Elior said. It should not be long now. If we can get her into the sunlight, I can heal her. Hardwin swiftly assembled his remaining soldiers, and they quickly followed not far behind him. Elior held them to a whisper and told them what must be done about Zenobia. We swiftly broke camp, and everyone began to trek upward through the steep tunnel. On my way into the tunnel, I noticed over a dozen gold lights illuminating the shadows, radiant like the same abdomen of the mystic Monadis I had met earlier in the ruins with Elior. The MKR was not far behind me, with 2 soldiers carrying Zenobia, who had her bound in case she fully became what I hoped she would not. I thought only mystic silver turns dead things into lurkers, I said to Elior as we pressed hard onward and upward. For most cases, yes, the MKR agreed. Yet Wendigo can turn even the living into becoming his own. If one cannot fight or escape the hunger, they succumb to it. Think of it as a sort of ethereal poisoning. You mean the existence of the celestial? Bartus interjected with a scoffing tone. There is no such thing. Elia and I moved aside and let the soldiers hasten in front of us. Bartus did the same. We began moving again, and soon I saw a brightness I had not seen in many days. I stepped out, feeling the warmth of a mid-afternoon on my skin. After basking briefly in daylight, I knelt beside Zenobia, lying down, still shivering, losing her colour, and being pulled into death's grip. The MKR stooped beside her and brought a ball of light into his hand. He placed his other hand on Zenobia's chest. "What do you believe in then, Master Explorer Bartus?" Elior asked. "Are you trying to debate me about the existence of the ethereal?" Bartus scoffed again. "You see magic with your own eyes, something far beyond your grasp. You do not have faith that there is such a place as the ethereal?" Elior asked. "I do find that odd." The MKR's retort drew somewhat of a crowd of us, even Hardwin, inching closer to hear Elior's words and see a miraculous sight. Zenobia began to appear less pale, regaining her colour. Her shivering began to ease, and her breathing commenced to draw in a peaceful posture. I could scarcely believe her body being magically healed. However, Bartus made it challenging to enjoy the moment. He started babbling again, trying to best Elior in knowledge, but no one shouted him down, not even the captain. I believe we were all enjoying seeing Bartus educated by a master keeper. "Faith," Bartus spat. "Faith is nothing more than religious rubbish. I believe in what I can see. I can see magic plain as day, yet it is absolutely foolish to believe in what you cannot." "At last, we agree on one thing," Elior interjected. "Religion is nonsense. However, faith is not the same as religion. Am I to assume correctly that you wake up each day and when you can, gaze into the mirror and not have faith you are breathing? You cannot see the air in and out of your lungs, but you can feel it. Faith is no different. It is what makes the unseen tangible." Bartus appeared at a loss for words. I could see he was trying desperately to find an argument for his reasoning. The cosmos is a vast wealth of knowledge that cannot be attained in one lifetime, nor 1,000 lifetimes. Elior continued. "As an educated man, you should understand that even though you may know much, what you do know is very little compared to all of the knowledge in the universe. To believe the ethereal does not exist, you, dear Master Explorer, have faith that it does not. The only reason you do not have faith that the ethereal exists is that you cannot prove that it does not exist, and you will not have enough time in your life to do so. Faith is much like magic. Magic is what I am, not what I do. Every man, woman, and child holds the power to change the way they think, walk, act, talk, and develop. Faith is given to us so we can be awakened to what is already inside us. Faith rouses us to what is not seen, yet faith is given to us only by what we cannot see. Thus, to assume such things do not exist without seeking them out first is foolish. Which of your accomplishments can you take with you to the grave? What colleagues will stand beside you when you no longer have eyes to see? What will define you then? You end up living a life full of accomplishments only to waste away, only to find that after your last breath, the things you did see no longer matter. They cease to exist as you can no longer see them. We are all destined for that day, Bartus managed to state. Really? Elior grinned, rising to his feet and stepping away from Zenobia. Then I shall speak plainly. You are indeed blinded by what you see. Unlike you, I have never seen my body wither, my mind fade, or my heart cease beating forever. But I will see yours do so, and many more after you are gone and forgotten. So, when I speak of the ethereal, I suggest you gain the knowledge and receive the faith of its existence before you even think about trying to debate about it, because at least one of us has been there and remains seen to speak of it. We heard a hovering sound above us. It shook us all from the shock of Elior's confirmation about the ethereal. We turned our eyes upward to see a West Main warship, low and dropping a platform to the ground. I turned to see our captain holding a magic bean. Hardwin sent a distress signal with his SHC when we reached the surface. The warship was a patrol craft that thankfully was already close by, and I held a thankful heart to not be walking home. After welcoming us aboard, they assigned us to our quarters, but I remained mainly in the medical ward with Zenobia, scribbling notes of what I had seen and heard. I cannot honestly explain the terror I still feel when in the dark. I often remember being in that place when the sun cradles into the horizon and gives way to dusk. Then I know the land shall rise in shadow, and I may have nightmares of my first journey to the Unlight. And yet my dreams held the image of a superb protector named Elior, who brought peace to my thoughts as I closed my eyes.